civil liberties agreement. And I said, you gotta be shitting me. This guy's suing us, and you've got him on the panel. And they said, well, the president has decided. So being a good soldier, I say, okay. So I go back up to NSA, and the next day or a few days later, they come up to NSA. And this guy's sitting about where you're sitting, maybe a little bit further. We had big tables at NSA. And he's got his arms like this, crossed. And he's looking at me like, Luke, I ate your father. And I looked at him somewhat askance. And I thought, well, you know, one of the greatest privileges and honor I ever had was to be the director of NSA. And they're great people. So I said, we'll tell you what we do, everything. And then all the seniors would leave the room, and the young folks that run these programs over the next 5 weeks, every time you come up here, they will do with you a 100% audit of everything we do. 100%. Everything will be visible to you. And they did. 5 weeks later, I come back up into the room. And the guy, now he stands up when I come in the room, and I thought, uh-oh, my protection unit's not here. I'm in pretty good shape. I've been working out. And I think, okay, I think I can take it. He comes walking around the room, and he grabs my arm. And you know how some people shake their arm really hard like that? Whole body is moving like that. Well, that's what he did. And I thought, he goes, you and your people have the greatest integrity of any agency I've seen. I was stunned. I said, what'd you do with the ACLU guy? And I said, well, don't tell me. Tell the president, tell Congress, tell the American people, and tell the people of NSA. And so he says, I'll do that. I'm going to read you this. I'll take my glasses. Bring home milk. Oh, wrong card. Yeah, after 42 years of marriage. To say I was skeptical of the NSA is in truth an understatement. I came away from my work on the review group with a view of NSA that I found quite surprising. Not only did I find that the NSA had helped us to thwart numerous terrorist plots against the United States and its allies since 9/11, but I also found that it is an organization that operates with a high degree of integrity and a deep commitment to the rule of law. Signed, Jeffrey Stone, board member of the ACLU, presidential review group member, and at that time he was the acting dean at the University of Chicago Law School. He was also a professor in war, President Obama. And as it turns out, he thought not only what we did, now he didn't agree with all the programs, and you can look up him online. It's G with Jeffrey with the G. There is some articles, because a few months later, maybe 8 months, 10 months later, he called me up and he said, we need to do a joint op-ed. And I think about that. An Army officer and a board member of the ACLU, we couldn't be further apart in what we believe in terms of our conservative or liberal. And I said, why in the world would you want to write an op-ed with me? And he said, well, I think this program needs to be continued. I think we need to make a couple modifications, but it needs to be continued. And I thought, why do you say that? I mean, I thought you would be absolutely against it. He said, well, if we don't give the intelligence community and law enforcement the tools they need, we have an attack, we won't have such breaches. And this program is run exceptionally well. And so he's been an outspoken person on that. We actually did the joint op-ed. And so, you know, as it turns out, that was a great decision by the president to have him on the board. Because what it did is the harshest critic that we had saw that what NSA was doing was right. He saw they're not reading your emails. They're not listening to your phone calls. They're doing exactly what the nation needs them to do. They're protecting us from terrorist attacks by those two programs. Yet, what we get in the press, what we get on social media, what we get on TV, is they're listening to your phone calls and reading your emails. And that's not true. And so the reason I point all that out is because you're going to be now entering into an area where the them is you. You're going to be securing their network. you're going to be helping to defend this country. You're going to have rules to do that by. You're going to know how to follow them. And it doesn't mean that you're reading everybody's email. It means you're protecting the network. And we need to share that information. So how do we do this then? How do we get it right? And the first step is we need a defensible architecture. The defensible architecture is an architecture, in my mind, that allows us to see what's going on in the entire network at network speed. That means we're going to need behavioral models and analytics running. We're going to need to see that data and have models that check for malicious software at network speed. And that's going to have to be integrated in with other types of cybersecurity, like firewalls, like endpoint devices, what you put agents on an endpoint, like other things like your SIMs, Splunk, integrate that together into a comprehensive plan. And then take multiple companies within a sector and have them work together and share information at network speed. In my company, we call that Iron Dome. And I know you're thinking, Iron Dome, isn't that the Israeli thing? It is. Yeah, I found out it is. But we got ours trademarked. Because it's cyber, it's true, we got a trademark. So I told the Israelis, we're good, we're good. Ours is trademarked, yours isn't. They did point out they have weapons and we don't. So we call that Iron Dome because you can share with them. But now consider this. If Sony was part of an Iron Dome and was protected like that, not only could they share information with other companies in their sector, but they could have shared that with the government at network speed. The government could, if directed by the President and the Secretary, take an appropriate action to defend it. That's where we need to get to. So, in my opinion, we have some great opportunities to go forward in this area. There's some tremendous opportunities. So, I know I'm supposed to open it up for questions, and I'm going to do that in 1 minute, but let me just end with a couple things. You know, one of the things that NSA, I'm going to tell you a couple stories about NSA and about leadership. One of the great honors and privilege I had to be at NSA was, these are folks that are doing great work for our nation. And they do most of it in secret because nobody wants to make a mistake and reveal classified information. And in 2006, I went over to Iraq, and one of my classmates from college, West Point, was Dave Petraeus. And he's over there, and he's just been put in charge of fixing this mounting problem. And if you recall, in 2006, the number of casualties that we were taking was growing every month at a significant rate. It was huge. And so I went over to see how good the information we were providing, how good that was for them. I thought we'd be the best. And I said, so what's your best form of intel? And I went around to everybody and they said, human. Really? I thought it would be SIGINT. And they go, well, yours is good, but it's about 16 hours late. I thought, whoa, why is that? Well, that's the way we always do. We take the information, we bring it back to Fort Meade, we send it through language folks, we get a really nice report, we make sure it's exactly right, perfect report. We only let it out after we made sure it was perfect, and then 16 hours after the fact, we get it back. And what they really want to know is, where's the bad guy right now? So if we get a perfect report that says 16 hours ago he was right on the street corner, that provides no value. So we came up with an idea called the Real-Time Regional Gateway, which came out earlier this year, open discussion. And that Real-Time Regional Gateway took that from 16 hours down to 1 minute. 1 minute. That's the kind of capability that we had. And that changed. In Dave Petraeus' book, you'll see that it's predecessor to changing the war. Now, just to give you an idea of the type of people that we had there, military and civilian. When I first got there, we had about 28 people in Iraq. Over the next few years when I was there, we would deploy over 6,000. And some of those were the wounded warriors and those who had 20-some killed in action. That's the NSA that I know. those are the people that are working right alongside and integrated into combat units. They're the real heroes of this country, and they deserve our respect. So when you think about that, and when you think about what Jim and the others are doing, this is a great step forward. The second issue I want to bring up is leadership. I have a sense of humor. We now know that. And in 2006, it was a great opportunity to be the director of NSA. I got to meet with the president a lot, sometimes under good conditions. Well, okay, once. So President Bush comes up to NSA in his helicopter, and his vehicles had driven up ahead of time, but his helicopter comes landing in. And I thought, this is going to be great. Our house is right on the corner. My wife will be able to see it. I'll greet him there. So I'm standing there with the helicopter lands. I go up and salute and say, welcome to Fort Meade, Mr. President. He goes, General, get in the car. We got to talk. Don't do that, Jim. Okay. That's exactly what he said. So he gets me in the car. He gets in the jump seat. I'm in his seat. He kicks everybody else out. This is great. And he says, General, we got two problems. First problem, they tell me you got too many bosses. And I think, uh-oh, danger, Will Robinson. My boss is him. It's Cheney. It's Rumsfeld. It's Cambone. It's the chairman. It's the director of national intelligence, Negroponte. And it's the commander of Stratcom. Which one are you going to throw under the bus and be alive the next day? I didn't want to be asked to go hunting. So I quickly told the president, it's all good. It's all good. They're all good to me. They really are. I love them all. Welcome my family. And actually, that was a true story. I did all my bosses were good for me and they helped me. The vice president, when I needed money, he helped us out right away. It wasn't, I'm going to agonize and see how stupid are you. It was, if you need help, I'm here to help you. It was great. He goes, well, General, if that's ever a problem, I'll fix it. I should have asked him, so who are we going to get rid of? I just want to know which one of those 7 is expendable. I didn't ask that. I got to ask him. He says, here's the second question. This thing on terror surveillance is going to get really bad. It's going to be bad. Really bad. Here's the deal. You defend the country, I'll take the heat. And he did. Every step of the way. He never backed down. He went into the people of NSA in a group about this big, with those folks who are doing terrorism, counterterrorism, and all these things. And he told them, said, you keep our country safe, I'll take the heat. Then he went out and did a press conference. And he took the heat for the nation. He never backed down. He never squirmed and said, well, it's that agency. He took the heat. He stood out front. He had Vice President Cheney. He had Mike McConnell, the DNI, then at that time. He had me and Hadley right behind him. He said, this is my program. And I'm doing it to protect this country. And when I look at leadership, that's the kind of leadership our country needs. People who will take the heat for the people that are coming. So, that's my story on cybersecurity. I'm going to open it up for questions. And I don't think we have much to go around, so you got to sound off if you got a question. Any questions? All right. Please.
Bill Buckman with the Department of the Army. A question.
Who?
With the Army, basically, we cover all about cyber areas and everything. A question with the power grid. There was something on the hill about Russia and China basically infiltrating our power grids, having like a virus, something sitting there. And they're saying at any time they can basically turn it on. And the question is, do you think our power grids are covered?
I think our power grid and the power generation units are at risk. I think they're doing a okay job, but it would not withstand a nation state. And it's something that we have to address. I actually do a few public discussions with Ted Koppel, who wrote the book Lights Out. You may have seen that. And he talks about the power grid and the risk to our power grid. As you go to the Internet of Things, that becomes even more porous and has greater risk to it. So it's something that we have to fix. We have to address the risk to the power grid, the financial sector, the government, healthcare, and others. We've got to take that on. So great question. Thanks for your service. Please.
You know, the simple motion for any country to attack US in the conventional world is the because US has got all kinds of deterrence. Now, how are we as a nation building our cyber deterrence so that anybody thinking of attacking, cyber attacking US, they know that there is a consequence?
Yes. So Jim said, can I repeat the question because we only have one mic in the back? Is that what you meant? Yeah. And from South Africa, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. And the question was, the U.S. has some tremendous capabilities to deter others from attacking us. Then what was the second part of your question?
How could we possibly replicate that in cyber deterrence?
How do we build a, I'm going to change this slightly. How do we build a cyber deterrence strategy?
Yes.
And I think there's two parts to building a cyber deterrence strategy. And this is for all of us in this room. The first thing you have to have is a defensive architecture. Because if you're vulnerable, and we're more vulnerable because we're more integrated than most other countries, we depend on the network. Our wealth, our intellectual property, just about everything we do is on that network. So if the power grid goes down and you can't get your iPhone up and you can't do things, you know, this is a big change to our way of life. But as was brought up by the previous question, you know, if all of a sudden the power grid goes out, that means resupply for stores, for gas, and all those things go down. That's a huge problem for our country. So what's the deterrence strategy? Step one is get a defensible architecture that you can defend your nation with. So I would say that's our first step. That's the journey that we're currently on. Step two is have attribution. I think what Cyber Command and the intelligence community works on is attribution. I think they do a good job of that. And then step three is present for the President, the Secretary of Defense, options on what they could do if somebody were to attack us to stop that. It can be aligned with other elements of national power. And so early on, President Obama said that he reserved the right to respond to a cyber attack with any form of power, to include cyber, which is correct. You want the whole spectrum of what you would do. So that if somebody were to attack us, they reserve the right to counter any way they see fit. And that's what we'd want the President and the Secretary of Defense to do. And I think that's the right thing. But we've got to fix our defense. And, you know, many believe that they can attack us and say, it wasn't us, it was some bad guys in our country, not us, yada, yada, yada. I think our intelligence community does a good job in this area, so. Okay, other questions, please.
Sir, Mark Elliott, I worked for you up at JFC CNW back in 2008 through 9, so good to see you again.
Good to be seen.
Nation states collect intelligence, it's what they do. Where do you draw the line between nation state intelligence collection and an attack? What's that magic line? How do you differentiate between normal nation state activities of gathering intelligence and the actual attack?
So the question is, how do you differentiate between espionage and attack, or the theft of information and the attack? And I would say it's based on what the objective of the people doing it was. Was it to collect information? I think that's espionage. I don't think that's an attack. If, however, they go in, and instead of doing espionage, they go in and destroy the data on systems, take down the power grid, or do something like that, that's gone from espionage to an attack. So this is a great question that you ask, because many people say the theft of intellectual property is an attack, but that's not correct. In our parlance, that's exploitation. They have stolen information. That's espionage. Now, how do you counter that? Have a defensible architecture. But people are going to, you know, they're going to do this with spies. You have internal threats, Snowden. You have all these things going on. That, and I believe some of that is pushed by other countries like Russia. They have an objective to collect information to know what we're going to do. I think it goes beyond espionage when they take it into influencing an election. So the timed release of data to influence voters to vote a certain way, I think is wrong. That's wrong, and the government's got to figure out what to do and how to do it, because that's a whole new world for us. So that's beyond espionage. That's now trying to shift how our nation acts. So those are things that, you know, one of the great things that I served for 8 years and 8 months as the director of NSA, and 5 years, almost 5 years as the commander of Cyber Command. Almost 4 years, I guess. It was a long time. And in both administrations, when we go into the National Security Council and talk these issues over, what I found out, both sides, great people trying to do the right thing for this country, period. You have great people who just take the facts and work this to get the right answer. You don't see a lot of people showboating in those. It's, how do we do this right? And so what you ask is one of the questions I am sure that the current administration and the next administration will have to wrestle with. What do you do when a nation state tries to influence our election, as has been done? What actions do you take? Is it sanctions? What other things? How do we work with our allies? What would our allies do? What should we do? And all those things they have wrestled and will wrestle with in the future. So great question, thank you. Other questions? Way back.
Are there any plans to engage people that are in the private sector who have, who are patriotic and want to help out? If there's some sort of volunteer firefighter model for cybersecurity professionals that, have time to give back when there's a need?
So, that's a great question. And the question is there a way for those that are in the private sector to become like a volunteer force at the time that the nation needs it? I think the closest to that right now will be the National Guard and how we employ the National Guard. And they've really stepped up and they're creating teams. So that's step one. I think the second part, it's interesting. You'll find this amazing. I learned to read. And one of the things that I read was if you look at the preamble to the Constitution, what it says, it's for the common defense. And you think about what these folks who wrote that Constitution stood for. They were trying to figure out, how do we do what you just asked? How do we do a common defense of our country? How do we take citizen soldiers and help them defend our nation and then put them back to being citizens after the war? That's where George Washington and all these folks came in. I wasn't there, but Jim was, and he told me all about it. And we need to do something like that again. And I'm not sure how, but I think it's one of the issues that we face. So I think step one, if we can, as companies, defend ourselves, and as government institutions, and share that information at network speed, then the nation can use that information to know who's attacking us and what to do about it. So our government's responsibility is not to read our emails, not to listen to our phone calls. It's to know, is somebody trying to attack us? And what do? It's for the common defense, for domestic tranquility, all the things that you think about, and for our future. So I think that's a great, and it's a short paragraph, because it only took me about 10 minutes to read. It's about 5 lines. So I'm learning. So when you think about that, that sets the stage for what you just asked. And that's a great question. Another question. Way back.
Sir, you mentioned attribution and adversary intent multiple times. What do you tell network owners who say, I don't care who's in my network, I just want them out?
Well, that's great. I think the attribution is not so much for them as it is for others in the community would be, and I would take it this step. Let's say that you're being hacked by ransomware. You just want them out. I got it. We need to do that. But if knowing how they got in and what they're doing could help the other 50 companies in your sector, then that's helpful. And if it's a bad guy who's doing stuff and this is law enforcement, then the FBI should go police that person up and help stop that before it gets worse. Or if it's a nation state and it's the beginning of an attack that could hurt our country, let's say